Good morning again. This is going to be a rather different approach to this session than the previous weeks. In week one, there were a number of rules and tips and guides on how to stand, how to hold your whatever you're taking photographs with, phone or tablet. We'll just call it a phone for the purpose of this exercise. Rule of thirds and things like that, which are effectively guides to help you to take good photographs. Then we showed you a little bit about editing photographs, how to do the obvious things like make sure that the horizons are level and that you've adjusted for the fact that your phone is going to try and mess up your lovely sunsets. And then we looked at how to save and protect the images and videos that you want to keep. Today, what we're going to do is look at showing them. Now, this is more of a discussion than anything else. I'm going to give a number of ideas, some suggestions, some hints and tips. I'm not going to recommend any products or companies again. It really is just a question of giving you enough information that you can think, oh, I never thought of that. Or can I ask a bit more about this or a bit more about that? Questions at the end today, as always, yes. But in the days and weeks and months to come, you might suddenly think, oh, how about, or he said this. Don't be afraid to pop in an email and we'll pick it up and we'll answer it. Because these things, sometimes it's months afterwards before you realize, actually, I would like to know how to do something. So we're going to look at the traditional thing, physical prints, then how to look at photographs online. And there's more ways of doing online display of photographs than you could possibly want to know. Increasingly, people are showing on a TV, and I've come across people who actually share across a TV using Zoom, but we're not going to try and drag you down that line. And the other thing I'm going to suggest you think about is maybe making a little movie or something, but we'll come back to that later on. Digital images that you take on your phone are now as good as film and slide. I just took a series of photographs here, some which I took, some of which I found online, just photographs taken on phones. And some of them I look at and think, that is stunning. I would love to be there. I'd like to have been that photographer. But the quality that you can get from a phone nowadays is as good. And there's an example of a burst photograph, for instance, just that one catching that Chinese fisherman. The photographs are as good as you would get with a camera. And as I said again a few weeks ago, in many ways, the photographs can be better because you can actually capture them first time. You don't have to spend hours and hours editing them around to get there. But this puts a kind of imperative on us, because having gone to the bother of getting something that can take decent photographs, what you won't be able to do is to show them. There is no point in having 5,000 wonderful photographs on your phone if nobody else ever sees them and you never look at them. It kind of becomes self-defeating. So let's have a little think about this. If you're going to share, I'll use the word sharing, but sharing just means looking at yourself sometimes. What is it you're going to share? Is it going to be one picture, or is it going to be all the pictures of your cruise down the Nile? Is it going to be all the pictures of that favourite niece or nephew or grandchild's life from christening pre-christening right the way through to wedding day or whatever, because that's a story that possibly only you have. So what is it you're going to pull together? They could be through albums that we talked about or in other ways. And who is it you're going to be sharing these with? Is it just for you? Are only you going to get to look at them? Are you going to show them to some friends, some family? Is the trip that you took down the Rhine something that you want to share with your bridge group? Whatever. Who is it you're going to be showing this to? And that allows you then to think, well, there's no point in showing them this. But there's me and Johnny, and there's me and whoever. So you start to build up a bit of an understanding of who actually is seeing it, and that drives what you're going to let them see. And why are you doing it? If you're just turning up for a chat over coffee with 2 or 3 friends, it may be you only want to show them 2 or 3 photos. However, if, back to this Rhine cruise theory of mine, if you're doing that with a larger group, maybe you'd want to have a dozen, 20, 30, and you could tell a bit of a story about the cruise and the interesting places you went to. Because understanding these things allows you to get some sort of direction on what you're trying to pull together, what the story is. It may just be 1 picture or 2 or 3, or it might be a bigger group of picture. But understanding those things allows you to sensitively pull together a set of images. I'll never forget, years and years ago, a lot of years ago, because I was a child at the time, one of the people that worked with my father brought a slideshow to the house of a tour that he'd done in Africa. So this was a tour he'd done in the 1950s in Africa. So it was a long time ago. And it was absolutely fascinating because we saw things that we'd never seen before. And the slideshow lasted an hour or more, just as he put 1 tray of slides in after another. But if he'd shown that to another group of people, they might have been bored rigid after slide 5. So sensitivity is important. So let's think about physical prints. Once upon a time, not that long ago and not that far away, we used to have albums and albums and albums of physical prints. We used to have loads and loads of piles of these photographs. Now we've got them on computer, on cloud or whatever. How are we going to get traditional prints for the future? Well, one way is just to print them on a color printer. That's not my particular printer, but it's a slightly different model. I've got a scanner printer, and that allows me to do everything I want in a compact and reasonably affordable space. So you can print your prints yourself. That's great. It means that you've got to have photo paper and take time, and it does take a bit of effort to do. Probably the best way of getting most of your prints done is to print them yourself, because it's cheaper than any of the alternatives. But how else could you do it if you can't be bothered or don't want to or don't know how to use a color printer? Well, the next thing is there are huge number of companies fighting to get access to your bank account, and thereby what they want to do is they want you to use them to print your photographs. So whichever these companies you go with, there are loads and loads of ways of getting photographs to them, and they will print them. The quality could be a little bit variable, so check the reviews. But some of the companies are doing absolutely wonderful things with your prints. My brother, for instance, took a wonderful photograph of Broughty Ferry Castle on a phone, an iPhone 11, and that's it in his lounge. It printed up to that size, and you go right up close to it, you would think it was taken by a professional. So if you do get that one stunning photograph, you can print it on canvas, on paper, on board, whatever, at pretty well any size, and the quality that you see is such that you can do that sort of printing with it. You're not limited in the size of what you do. So you can print, you can get others to print, and it can be printed in all sorts of ways. But also, you can print postcards. Now, there are, again, a whole load of companies who you can get an app for it or whatever. And what you do is, you see, when you're on your holiday, you can say, I want this photograph and I want it printed on postcard size. I want it to go to that address. And here's the message I want on the back of it. Here's me at the top of the Jungfrau. Here's me having my sunset mojito, whatever. And obviously it's not free, but they will address, print, and post that postcard for you. So your postcards can arrive within typically 2 or 3 days of you asking them to do it while you're still on holiday. And a lot of people find that a very good way of doing it, because it's far more personal than the, here is the church view, here is the harbour view photographs that you typically get when you're away. It's more personal, it's also more expensive, but it's a very good way of sharing those photographs and those moments with the 1 or 2 people you want it to go to. Increasingly, you can do greeting cards. So you can send very personalized birthday, anniversary, Christmas, New Year, Easter, Hanukkah, whatever pictures with anybody. We've all seen the adverts for moonpig.com. They were the first one to really shout about it, but other companies have been doing this for years, and there's plenty of them. Strangely enough, very often the same companies that do postcards, because it's the same technology. But you can then get your personalized greeting cards. You can get 1 of, you can get 20 of, you can get 100 of, and you've then got your personalized greeting card. And that's a very good way of sharing your photographs. Now, an interesting thing we're talking about Rhine cruises. I was on a cruise in the Danube and the Rhine 3 years ago now, in the old days of, BC, before COVID. And one of the guys I got very friendly was a guy and his wife from Fife. And what Bob did was that he had sat with the itinerary before he left home, and he had said, well, okay, what I want to do is I want to have a photo book. And he had designed the basic look of his photo book, and then he was taking photographs every day of the church, the village, the places we went, whatever. And he would take the best 1 or 2 of those, and sitting with a glass of beer in one hand and his tablet in the other hand, he was dropping today's photographs into his photo book. And when he finished the trip, he asked him to print it, and he reckoned that the photo book complete, and I think it was about a 50-page photo book, would arrive at his house in the week following the cruise. So he had the complete story of his holiday, and there was only ever going to be 1 copy of it. I did something similar for my brother's 60th. I had photographs going back to days after his birth, through christening, all the rest of it, the classic embarrassing shots as well as the good ones. And for his birthday, that was the present I gave him. And what was fascinating was, at the party for him, everyone was picking up the book and looking at it, because by having a lot of photographs of him, it touched all the bits of his life, and everybody who was at that party was part of his life, and they were involved in it, or they actually appeared in it. And interestingly, that photo book, several years later, is still at the top of the pile in his bookcase because he looks at it and other people look at it. It's a way of overarching, his whole time on earth. And it's nice to do. But it could be christening books, it could be story of a wedding. They are a very, very good way of working with your photographs to share them. The software is actually very, very simple to use. You say, well, I want, a book of 5 pages, 20 pages, 50 pages, and it helps you to lay out all the pages and helps you to adjust the photographs. If a photograph is a little bit too dark or too light, it will help you to edit that photograph then and there. And it will then produce a very good result, sometimes a spectacularly good result. And there are very few poor photo book companies out there. Another one that I came across when I was doing research for this one is fridge magnets. Now, we've all seen, the photograph of this, the photograph of that as a fridge magnet in the shops. But what some of these companies do is actually very clever. Now, there's a frame of 12 fridge magnets. Some of them will do 9, some of them will do more. And you can say, well, okay, in the case of that 12, all 12 could be different photographs. Or you could say, well, let's have the top 6 one photograph and break it up like a jigsaw. The next block of 4 on the bottom left, another photograph, and then 2 small ones. Or all 12 could be jigsawed of one big photograph on the fridge. So it allows you to have on your fridge or wherever, to have all of the story you want to tell of whatever it is. But fridge magnets struck me as being a lovely way of having on show those photographs. It's a great idea. Where it tends to run into seen it, done it, is that once you've got them all, changing them becomes slightly more complicated because you've got to get more printed if you want to add another one. Is there some way of being able to share photographs and to change things as you get bored of seeing something, or as a new photograph comes along, or as you want to tell a different story? And the answer is what's called a gallery wall. You put on a wall in the house, or maybe in a staircase, you put simple clipboards with clips on the top, and you can print photographs at any size, either again on your color printer or get them done professionally and sent to you, and you can move them around. You may not always want to have those kids in it. You may not want to have this person, or you may want to have different events. And once you've got those pictures printed, you can swap them in a couple of minutes. And it allows you to have a gallery that speaks to you or speaks to whoever else is in the house. And it's actually not that expensive to do. All it needs is the hooks to put the clipboards on the wall, and that's it, you've done it. So how do you get prints from another company? Well, Boots allow you to and many other places, I'm not particularly a great fan of Boots for a number of reasons, and the quality can be variable, but take them for an example. You can go into a store with your phone or your memory card, and you can just stick it into a device, say what size of print you want, and print it. If you go into Asda, and most of the Asda stores have it, you can take your phone or your memory card in, and they will actually print you a cake with a photograph on top of it. And we do this for birthdays and things, because whether it's a pretty photo or an embarrassing photo, you can have the birthday cake, the celebration cake, whatever. it's a nice cake. You choose the cake, you choose the photo, and they will do, they will do everything for you. It's a good way of doing it. Another way of getting your prints is that you can email your photographs to the company. Sometimes that's a bit tricky because a good photograph at any reasonable quality can be big. And sometimes your email provider might not like you sending very big photographs. So very often what they prefer you to do is to upload your photographs direct to their website, and they will then process them and do whatever you've asked with them. Moving on to online display. Moving away from the pile of albums, let's think about sharing. And strangely enough, one of the most common places that people share photographs is on Facebook. Now, I just grabbed this photograph from the Lost Edinburgh site, the Lost Edinburgh group on Facebook. And what happens there is that people take photographs from the 50s or 60s and older and just say, my father took this, or I took that. And do you remember, who remembers that bridge that used to be across there, whatever? And very quickly it turns into a discussion on the group of yes, and I've got a photograph like that. And it becomes very much an open discussion on whatever it was. That sort of use of a photograph can be very, very good. This is more looking at the older ones, but also in the newer ones, there are Rhine cruise groups, there are bridge groups. Facebook covers almost everything. All the obvious flags about making sure your privacy settings on Facebook are set very, very strict, because we all know what Facebook is like. And just in passing, because we had would you believe we had a barbecue next door on Saturday afternoon where a couple of neighbours dropped into the garden of the people next door because we can't go in the house. And someone said, we had adverts suddenly popping up on our iPad when we were discussing something very unusual. And if you've not been on the IT security talk that I do, find the place where your privacy settings are set and make sure that Facebook, Messenger, Instagram, etc. do not have access to your microphone, because if they are listening, they will start popping adverts at you. Talking of Instagram. Instagram, in many, although it is owned by Facebook, it in many ways is the mirror image of Facebook. In Facebook, it's about chat and some people share photographs. On Instagram, it's about sharing photographs. And if somebody puts a photograph up, people can comment on it and say, yes, I remember that, that's beautiful. But nobody else can add other photographs into that thread. It is for that photograph. And that photograph was taken, as you can see in a nice mist today, it was actually 2 or 3 days ago. And I really like that one. That's one of the photographers that I follow on Instagram. And even if you never post on Instagram, it's actually quite interesting sometimes just to look at the photographs. I follow photographers in Edinburgh, the West Highlands, and the Northern Isles. And some of their photographs make me just want to throw my camera and my phone in the bin because they're just so good. Sometimes, they're also just doing silly things. So moving on from that kind of sharing, there are pure photo sites. Flickr is the most obvious one. It was owned by Yahoo. I've kind of lost track of who owns it now. That is one of the albums that I've built up on Flickr. Nothing particularly special, just some nice photographs I took on a photo workshop that I attended. And Flickr is quite good for that sort of thing. A lot of people fell out of love with Flickr a few years ago. It's not as busy as it was, but for all that, it's a nice place to share your photos if the photo sharing thing is important to you. But there's loads of others. There's SmugMug and. I think maybe there's the trend is away from pure photo sharing to sharing with a purpose. But again, that's a subject for a one-to-one discussion. If you go back a couple of weeks when we're talking about storing photos, the fact that you can take the photos that you've taken on your phone and immediately have them available on your tablet, whatever it is, and the ability to look at them, to share them, to put them in some kind of order, whether it's Apple's iCloud, Amazon, Google, etc., etc., etc. It can be quite nice just to have your tablet with you when you're having coffee with your friends and just say, see what I did, this is, or have a look at this, or, you know, I finally went up the Scott Monument to the top and there was nobody else there and I got this photograph, that sort of thing. That can be extremely nice. And because you're only sharing one or two photographs, you avoid the risk of boring them to death. So where else? Where else can you show those photographs? Well, excuse the very poor photograph, I just grabbed that late last night. If you've got a smart TV or a connected TV, or if you've got a set-top box which makes a dumb TV smart, like an Apple TV or an Amazon Fire Stick, you can set it so that all the photographs on your phone through iCloud or Amazon Photos or whatever are available as a slideshow where you can look at a whole set of photographs and zoom in and zoom out on them, and you can have them as a screensaver. And that's what we have here. When the TV is just sitting and we're not using it, we let sometimes, not regularly, but sometimes just let the slideshow run, and it's the photographs that I've tagged as favorites. And we sit there saying, oh, do you remember this? Do you remember that? Who's that? How did we get there? And all of a sudden, it's become a dialogue. And if we've got people in, very often they are in those photos as well. So it's a nice way of looking at things sometimes. So often, these things can take over. The trick in this one is not to let them take over, but it can be very nice to do. Another idea that I would suggest you play with, and I would say do play with it, is to be your own Cecil B. DeMille. Now, you're not going to make the next blockbuster, but sometimes half a dozen photographs can make rather a nice little movie. Two ways you can do this, and different pieces of software have got different ways of doing it, and I've been astonished with how few people know how easy it is to do. I've got an iPhone, and at the one-to-one sessions that we run, and we'll get back to when the vaccine kicks in and we're able to meet face-to-face again, and people are asking me about the photos on their phone, and I say, well, what about the memories you've got? And I get that strange look. Go into photos and look. I didn't know it was doing that, because what it does in the background, when the phone is sitting doing nothing else, probably when it's charging, it will quietly run through the photographs that you've got and put them into a little movie called a memory, which you can delete and you can edit. You can take photos out, you can put photos in, you can change the title, but it gives you something to look at. Equally, there are plenty of pieces of software where you can manually pull photographs together, and on iPhone, on Samsung, on Huawei, or whatever, there will be a piece of software that can can do this. And the capabilities of these bits of software, if you want to have titles and transitions and clever music and blah, you can do all of it on your phone, on your tablet. It is absolutely astonishing. Not that long ago, no, it is long ago, maybe 25 years ago, I got into video editing, and I had to spend almost as much money buying an adapter card for my PC as a new phone would cost me now. And the phone can do far more. So having got that, play with it. It might actually be something you find quite interesting. Here's an example. So that's one that I just found online. It's not a particularly good one, but it's an example of the kind of little video that you can make about an event, going away for the weekend or whatever. And you make it, and it's a piece of fun. You might show it on your television. You might just send it to somebody else who's involved. And then you delete it because it's served its purpose. Because there are more ways to look at and share than ever before. Now, this list of ideas that I've come up with, and that's all it is today, it's a list of ideas, is not exhaustive. I'm aware there are far more ways of doing it, and some of them are very technical, some of them are very simple. But in the same way as if you duplicate a photo, you can edit it, and if you make a mistake, you delete the edit and go, and you've not lost anything. Most of these facilities you can play with, and it won't cost you anything. It only costs money to print a photo book when you print a photo book. But you can build the photo book, have a look at it. You can even print it out on your color printer or your black and white printer and have a look at it and decide to do nothing with it. But play with it. The amazing quality of images that we have now allow you to try all sorts of things, and you can cut and you can collage, you can print, you can look at, you can share. It's absolutely amazing what's possible. And the beauty of it is that this is where we are now. One of the things that we know is that in times of recession and in times of change, and certainly this year with COVID has been a time of change, the technology companies will have been working as hard as they can to find new, clever ways of differentiating them from everybody else to try and capture market share. And that means that there will be new ideas, new variations, new toys to play with, most of them very simple. So go looking, and if you get an advert on Facebook or something that you hear about from one of your friends that we've not heard about before, please don't be shy in popping an email to us and saying, I came across this. Because the next time we give this sort of talk, we can add that one in.